Welcome to the Lord Rexworth podcast, where we embark on a transformative journey to set your mind and spirit on the right path. I'm Lord Rexworth. Join me from Castle Rexworth as we engage in insightful conversations with a diverse range of guests, including VTubers, content creators, and thought leaders. Delve into the realms of creativity, inspiration, and self-discovery as we explore the stories and perspectives that shape the digital landscape. Whether you are seeking motivation, entertainment, or simply a moment of tranquility, the Lord Rexworth podcast offers a multifaceted experience that transcends the boundaries of traditional content. Tune in and join us on this captivating exploration of the mind, the spirit, and the fascinating world of those who inspired us. And speaking of those who inspired us, please welcome my guest. It's Valentime. Val, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I've been really excited for this for quite a little bit of time because you talked about this when you came on my show and just like, hey, I'm also doing this. So if you want to be on, I'll get you on. I'm like, oh yay, I'm so excited. So I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely, yeah. It was something I'm kind of toying with the idea late last year, 2023, and then just sort of made it a New Year's resolution of mine. Okay, 2024, we're doing this. We're going to make a podcast, and I'm going to have guests on. And you know what? It sort of focusing on the positive of motivation, of setting the spirit right, but also inspiring other people with other people's stories. And I couldn't think of a better person to have on as one of my guests than you, Val. I'd like to perhaps go back to the beginning and maybe ask you, what was the beginning for you? How did you become this charming bat VTuber who happens to have a chat show on Twitch?
So I want to say it was perhaps 2021, and as a lot of people know, that was coming off of like the tail end of the big old pandemic thing, which you know it was a time for everybody.
Yes.
And the year prior, I was talking with my best friend, and I'm like, "What is this thing that I see on my screen?" At the time, I was looking at a VTuber by the name of Girl DM. Now, Girl DM she is a pretty big VTuber,
Yes.
one of the biggest 3D tubers.
Hmm.
And what really drew my attention was just how impressive her facial capture was and the animations were for her model. And in my eyes, I'm like, "Wow, this is so cool." I'm like, "What is this?" And so I looked at my best friend, or rather talked with him and I said, "Hey, what is that?" And he's like, "Oh, well, that's a VTuber." I'm like, "What is a VTuber?" He's like, "Well, it's X, Y, and Z and all this, and that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And sat there for like 5 minutes, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do that." And we both laughed and never talked about it again until like a year later when I saw another clip surface. And that's when I was like, "Hey, bud, yeah, I'm gonna be a VTuber again." He's like, "Oh, for real this time?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And so thus started the planning process and the journey to where I debuted now. Cause this was 2 years in the making of starting that journey in about late 2021. Cause I'm a university student. So I have a lot of things to do. I'm very busy. And so it's not something I put so much time into. And once 2023 rolled around, I was getting to a point where I'm like, okay, I have a little more time. I should invest a little more effort into this. And so I really kicked into high gear. And the current iteration you see that don't worry guys, it's not this normally this like uh lower resolution, just internet is being the internet. And
Right.
it feels like an interview with like you have Chris Wallace interviewing like a diplomat and he's just over like a Zoom call, and then just the internet is like but this model that you see is actually the sixth version of it.
Oh my.
So I went through quite a few design changes between the first iteration, which I still have on my computer, which I won't ever show unless like I don't know, maybe like for a 5-year anniversary, I'll show it or something like that. But until then, that is staying in the vault. I'm not bringing that back out. And I still have test recordings of when I was using my Streamlabs because I actually used that model to audition for Niji Sanji
Oh, wow.
back. Yeah.
Given the recent headlines, how much are you regretting that decision?
Well, given the recent headlines, that was I think that was 2 years ago, if I want to
Yeah, I
say.
mean, hindsight's 2020, but it's like,
Very much so, but it's one of those
yeah.
things I don't regret,
Okay,
because
fair
at the
enough.
time at the time, it was very much I don't have, really a whole lot, like, with VTubing, and so I don't have a following, I don't have a standing, and so for me, it's what do I do to sort of get my name out there? Because I auditioned originally on March 27th, so I submitted that March 27th of 2022, and then I redid my audition for like in January of 2023. So I auditioned for Niji Sanji twice.
Oh,
Now I got a callback for Niji Sanji, but with the stuff that they wanted, I realized, I don't know if this is worth it. I don't
price
know
was
if
too
this
high.
price is too high. And so at that time, I was going through an internal conflict of, do I want to be corporate? Like for a chance to become a corporate VTuber, and I can get my name out there and sort of get the ability to grow, or do I want to retain my own image, my own assets, and I become my own individual? At the end of the day, I realized, well, it'd be much easier for me to do this considering I'm still a university student.
Mm,
And I don't regret that because at the time, Niji Sanji was working, it was doing its thing. There wasn't as many bad things as we see
right.
now.
Yeah.
Um, but it's one of those things where again, hindsight is 2020. So I can't say I regret auditioning because everybody was doing it. If you had the opportunity to audition for a company that would get you in a better place, would you? I feel like you'd be crazy not to.
Yeah,
You
no,
know?
that's fair enough. Yeah. Even if it was a shot in the dark, you still had to shoot your shot.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. I get that. Um, so how, and I am curious, how radical of a departure is each one of these different models that you have from each other? Was this sort of a linear progression of design?
It was definitely a linear progression because when I first started with the very first iteration of my model, I was using basic assets that VRoid provided. Because when I went into the whole VTuber process, I'm like, I could either spend money and buy a model myself, or I could make the model that's can already be rigged and already be moved and all that. And I said, the second option seems much better. And so I went in, I was in VRoid. And for those that don't know, VRoid is a studio that allows you to build your own VTuber.
Mm,
And I did that, and so the very first one, the hair was different, the hair was different, the clothes were different, ears were a little different. So it just everything, the vibe was still here with Val. However, um, it just it didn't sit right with me because I'm like, as much as I love the free assets, I'm like, I want something that is a little more unique. Now the button-up shirt with the white shirt underneath, is that unique? I don't know. But I decided to invest a little bit of money to buy better assets. And so I'm like, well, I really like this hair. I want to make sure I keep the glasses. I thought the glasses that is my little, unique thing I have with this model. And
yeah.
that was one thing I carried over from the original. However, the glasses were much more circular and much thinner, and I just didn't like it. And looking back on, I'm like, I'm so happy I went with these glasses.
Mm,
But it's one of those things where it very much is like it didn't depart too far. It was like I need to change the outfit. The hair just doesn't look right. I feel like the bone structure could be a little different. And so like I said, one of these days I can show I'll show what they are. But until then, that's staying in the vault. And even then, that first iteration of Val had a different name as well. So it wasn't Sebastian Valentine. Uh his, his name was Valentine Smith because I thought it was the funniest thing at the time.
Valentine Smith. That
I hate.
tell me you're calling yourself a pseudonym without telling me you're calling yourself a pseudonym or something like that.
I was
That
like,
does sound like an undercover name.
it's like, yes, my what's your name? My name is John Doe. No kidding. Here's my license. Well, it's funny that you say that because like even parts of that, my original concept, I still have with me because my professional VTuber email is still has that name.
Hmm.
Because if your name was like John Fredrickson, some people like to do, Fredrickson John like 2985 at Gmail or at yahoo.com. And so in my email, my VTuber email, which whether or not I'll change, we don't know. I still have that remnants of that name in that email because I haven't bothered changing. I'm like, it's fine. So no matter how much I changed, I still keep remnants of the original design because it's what Val originally was. And I feel like if it's like that ship of Theseus, if I take those parts and replace it, it's no longer going to be Val. You
Hmm.
know?
I suppose that's true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as fashion goes, I will say that you do look quite stylish. I mean,
Oh, thank you.
being somebody who works full time and VTubes part time, though sometimes it feels like a full time job. You look about as fashionable and trendy as most of the people in my professional office environment. So, I mean,
It's a nice casual.
yeah, a little business casual going on. That's and certainly nothing wrong with that. You'd fit right in with any Silicon Valley tech company or most hipster office environments.
I mean, to be fair, I'm originally from California, so
Ah,
like,
well, there you
because
have it then.
I've talked about it before, where I call Las Vegas my hometown, the city of sin. It's actually a really nice city to live in. But while I say I've just spent most of my life living in Las Vegas, so I call that my home. But I'm
Hmm.
originally from California, specifically Southern California. So perhaps I could explain some of my more laid back attitudes or whatever you want to describe
Yeah.
that as.
I mean, it does explain the sort of chill vibes that you have, and I do like that. But that does bring up an interesting question. Having lived in Las Vegas, which is very much not just a gambling mecca, but also an entertainment type city, a tourist
Yes.
city, having been originally from California, the home of Hollywood, the home of movies and cinema and television,
Mhm.
um, do you think being from and living in those environments has had an impact or an influence on your your career moves, your choices for university study, um, all of it? Has that had an impact in any way that you could tell?
Very much so, I would have to say, because I will say thankfully I'm not from Los Angeles. Both my parents are from Los Angeles. Um,
Ah,
but I'm from a different Southern California city. Whether or not you'll track that down, that's up to you. I don't know who'd want that information. Um, but it's one of those things where um growing up, my family, especially on my father's side, they are all Hollywood individuals.
mm.
Like, very much they work in Hollywood, like, they work in the special effects department of Hollywood.
Oh,
So much
cool.
so that my uncle, within the past 15 years, won an Oscar for best special effects makeup design. I won't say what
Incredible.
movie. I won't say a movie. You have 15. I don't know what year actually, but it's in the 2000s. You have 23 years to figure it out. But there's so many, and there's so many teams to do that. But yeah, like from my dad's side of the family, my grandfather was a special effects guy who worked in Hollywood in the 30s and 40s.
Oh,
His
wow.
son became it. His brother became it. Then their sons did it. And then you have their like most like the youngest child in that family who's I think in his 40s, which very good friends with on that side of the family. He's an audio engineer. And so it just felt right growing up that entertainment was kind of something I wanted to do because originally I was going to go and become a symphony performer because I'm a classically trained bassist and I was like, oh, I was just going to join a symphony and play that in my life. I'm like,
Y-
life had other plans.
Wow. Yeah, you were just a little inside information before we started recording. We were talking offline just a little bit about classical music, and you know, I usually start streams with a recording of Elgar's Enigma variations, specifically the portion Nimrod, and you just all of a sudden like, oh yeah, I've got you. All of a sudden started pulling out this practical gazelle shaft of no sheet music from your desk. I thought that was I just thought that was so interesting and
Well,
really cool, actually.
well, it's funny that you say that because like I feel like I've noticed a lot of people these days, just especially just like VTubers and performers, they keep a lot of these like things nearby where you'll be like, "Hey, oh, you know the X, Y, and Z thing? Oh, well, I have that." And they like whip something out to show up like, "Where did that come from?"
You never know with these types of conversations. You just never know. I mean, in your experience with your show, the VOD, what
Mhm.
has been the most like out of nowhere moment like that where you mention something or your guest mentions something and you're just like, how in hell did we end up talking about this?
Um I think there's probably 2 moments that stand out to me. The first one was with Cynical Beanicle, who was the individual who was right after you,
Oh.
and I find out and for those that don't know, Cynical Beanicle is a wonderful VTuber, and she's
Mm.
been growing a lot recently, and I had not seen a whole lot of her streams, I have only seen her main design, that she had. And so she on stream, she's like, "Oh yeah, I have different designs." I'm like, "Oh, you do? Can we see them?" "Sure." And the thing that I see she goes to is her like a kind of a chibi model in a jar. And I thought to I'm like, "Where did that come hold on, where did this come from?" And not only that, it was so she had that little chibi model that she had the jar was a toggle, but there was also some stuff in the jar, which I'm not gonna talk about.
Yeah.
But that was also rigged.
Oh goodness.
So I'm just sitting there, I'm like, Cynical, what is this?" And she's like, "You know exactly what this is."
Oh no.
I'm
Oh
like
no.
and so the entire time, Phantom the Phantom Fame, my co-host,
Yeah.
we're just sitting there, we're like, "So you just have this? Is there a point to this?" He's like, "No, I just thought it'd be fun." I'm like, "More power to you, I suppose."
Yeah. Go, yes. Go with God and be safe.
Go with God and be sa what is that? What is that? Vaya con Dios is the Spanish phrase, the Spanish
Yeah,
one.
I suppose so. Yeah. I mean, that's not much you can say about that. And just because I don't want to have to mark another podcast episode as explicit, we won't get into the details. But
No,
you
not
know,
at all. I
if you know, you know. So yeah, which I guess leads into my next question. The
Sure.
concept for the VOD. Tell me about
Yes.
how that idea was birthed, how that came to be, and how you got to be the gentleman behind the desk, as it were.
So, when I was planning this entire thing, the whole VTubing career, uh, one thing I knew I wanted to focus on was creating a brand that set myself apart from other people's things. And from that, I saw that some people were doing, concerts, some people were doing tournaments. And something I saw that not a whole lot of people were doing were just because this is about mid last year, like summer of last year. And I noticed there weren't a whole lot of podcasts, there weren't a whole lot of talk shows that were in the VTubing community. Like they were there, but it was either the only ones I could think of, the only two I could think of were Iron Mouses and Takahata 101 of Team 4 Star. And those are the only two I could think of that were big and continuous at the time.
Wow.
Um, and that were made from VTubers, by for VTubers for VTubers. And that was what I saw. Now, at the time, I'm like, what is something that I can have that I can separate the rest of my content from, and I can sort of keep that and do that. And because at the end of the day, content creation is it can become a stagnant pool of mud if you don't shake it up a little bit.
True.
And I realized, and I've been open about this. I'm like, what is something that I can do that is fun, engaging, and that can net me some followers and some views each week? And I'm like, well, what if I just did a talk show? Because everybody has a podcast. That we just live in a podcast world. That's why late night talk shows are not as successful anymore.
Mm.
They just don't innovate. But you see these podcasts that are coming out and they're just so successful. Now, I thought, what if I did a return to form of late night talk shows where, because if you notice with podcasts, a lot of the times, it can be about any topic. And like for instance, I dare to say this is more of a talk show than a podcast that you have going here, because with a lot of podcasts I've seen, they have specific themes. They don't often have guests. They don't need to have guests. Let me rephrase that. But once you start incorporating you have a new guest every week and you talk about this, I feel like at that point, that feels more like a professional talk show. Uh, like, and I thought to myself, this is what I want to do because I love gaming. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I prefer performing and talking with people. And so I was driving out of my place of work because I work as an audio engineer. I was leaving my studio. And as I'm in my car, I hit the brakes because one, a car sped past another car that was blocking my view, so I had to stop. So I hit the brake, lurched forward, and I leaned back. I'm like, the VOD. That's the name. That's the name of my talk show. It sounds so dumb, but it's one of those label moments that I won't forget because of how connected it was. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is what I know I want to do. Because if I wanted to, I'm like, if I could cut out all of my other streams and just have the VOD, that's what I'll do. And thus the VOD was born.
Wow.
Um, and the whole process behind it was I spoke with my head mod Tathan about it. I spoke with my artist Apophis Nova about it. I talked with some of my other friends about it. I'm like, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think? And they're like, could be fun. We don't know until we see it, but you know, it's something that, a talk show, perhaps that could be successful and that could be fun. Who knows? I'm like, all right, that's what I'll do. And since then, debuting it, I think first or second week of October, I'd say I've had relative success with the show.
I'd say so too. You're up to, what is it now? 36, 37 episodes in total, you mentioned?
32 episodes.
32.
33 will be next week.
Okay.
Like what the moment I realized that this was going to be a fun, successful show is when I had to start opening up slots for the following month. Because
Wow.
as it currently stands, looking at my schedule, because I have an X or a Google Sheets form or a thing that anybody can see. It's accessible to everyone. I have the entirety of February filled up, and I'm filling up for March, and I have the last or the first 2 weeks of April are open as well. And so I'm like, if I'm just getting continuous people here, I'm like, they just want it. They want to be on a show. Like I made a post about it on Reddit, and I had like 60 different people reach out and just be like, hey, I want to do the show. I want to be on the show. I'm like, okay. And then I got overwhelmed, like, oh shoot, okay, what do I do?
Right.
So,
So
it's been a ride.
it certainly sounds like it, and that's incredible success that your slots are filling up fast. And so, if you yourself are specifically a VTuber and you would like to be a guest on the VOD, please do reach out to Val. We'll have all of his information in the show description when we upload this, both to Acast and to YouTube and also Spotify. Um, so, how many episode? Remind me, how many episodes per week do you do of the VOD?
I I do about 2 episodes a
Okay.
week, and they're 2 hours each.
Mm,
And from that, that averages out to anywhere between 8 to 10 episodes a month. I've been doing it since October. So, yeah,
okay.
a lot of episodes so far.
And from this, you've seen that your calendar's filling up fairly quickly.
Mhm.
Have you and your team looked at possibly expanding beyond 2 episodes a week, or you just want to kind of see how that goes for right now?
It's funny that you talk about that because I've had this conversation not only with my mod, but my former, co-host. I say former because, for those that don't know, the Phantom Fame was my wonderful co-host. He had to step away because he's gonna be a father soon, he's having twins,
Oh,
and so I wanted to.
congratulations!
Yeah, I love the Phantom Fame. He's so awesome. And so he had to step away to focus on being a father soon, and then also focusing on his own brand. And that was something we talked about when I asked him back in November. I'm like, you know, just be on as long as you can, and until then, we'll just keep powering through, and it'll be a lot of fun. And
Yeah,
so one of the discussions I had, because I'm always thinking about every week, I'm thinking, what can I do to innovate and what can I do to add on to this show? And I had a conversation with both of them, and I'm like, do you think this show would be successful if I did it as my sole thing, my sole s- source of streaming? And one said, "Well, I think one of them said, I think it could be fun. I mean, you get to have more people on, you get to talk with them." And the other one said, "I don't think so. I think part of the charm is you only do it twice a week." And that was kind of what I leaned into is I like that it's only 2 episodes a week.
hmm,
Just because one, uh it doesn't get overwhelming in terms of I'm only just streaming those, and I don't think the show is at a point where it can be a weekly or a daily talk show like it is like the Tonight Show or
yeah.
the Tonight Show, David Letterman, all that stuff. Um, but the other reason because of it is I feel like it wouldn't be fair to my guests that I have on. And the reason being is because I'd rather have people miss my gaming streams than the VOD. Because as soon as I start to add more shows, I feel like it foster a feeling of, oh yeah, we're having this is what's going on. We're having this person. I can't make it. I can always miss that. I could just go to the next one. And that's my biggest fear that I'd have about having more shows is I don't want people to miss out on potentially one of the best episodes they'll ever see. And so by only keeping it to 2 episodes a week, I know that, "Oh, hey, I missed this one, but I know I can go to this one." Or if they miss both of them, they're like, "Shoot, I have to wait another week in order to see the next one." And I noticed that in my chat because people who haven't seen the show for a little bit of time, like, "Oh, yeah, I'm finally able to catch a show." And it's the biggest, like, happiest feeling I have is that people haven't been able to see in a while. They're like, "Oh, I get to come back and I get to see what I have missed." And so it's more than just expanding the show, it's I wanna make sure I'm keeping the dignity and respect of making sure that people who are coming on are having their time valued, if that makes
That's
sense.
that's a really fair point. It's a, sort of a quality over quantity approach,
Oh, yeah.
and it's totally understandable given that you have such a devotion to quality with what you do. I can tell just by listening to you. But more than anything, I also think to some of those legends in the late night world, um, Letterman, Carson, Leno, uh, for all of them, they were having to do an hour a night, 4 or 5 days a week,
Mhm.
um, to the point where you could tell some nights were definite off nights for them, where it was a grind. And on top of everything else that they had going on, because that was not the only thing that they did. They did their own stand-up comedy tours. They, did their own appearances. They had other side gigs going on. Jay Leno with his garage and um, Letterman with his IndyCar crew and Johnny Carson with um, just hanging out on the boat with a pitcher of martinis. Uh, um, it was it was just one of those things where it just you could tell it kind of became a grind with a lot of them after a while,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was little wonder that they that they lasted. Well, I mean, it was amazing that a lot of them lasted as long as they did. 30 years for Carson, about
Mhm.
20 years for Leno and Letterman. But I think with that approach, could you um, see yourself continuing to do this on ad infinitum? And I guess a follow-up question to that is, what does the future hold for you? What can we expect in the future from the VOD and from Val?
So I definitely think I could see this going on for a while. And that's why I choose to do only 2 episodes a week, is because I have, in my experience, where there have been weeks where I have not done my gaming streams, my other, just streams that are non VOD related, and I just did the VOD. And from that, I learned I could cancel all of my normal streams and just do the VOD Friday night, Saturday afternoon, and I would be happy. Why? Because every guest I have had, save for one, but that's a story for a different time. Um, I have loved and had a wonderful time with. And the thing is, not every show is going to be a banger. I'm just going to say.
Hmm.
That's why I take a little more time to really get to know and screen and vet the people I have on. Um, because at first I wanted to have everyone on my show, and I still do. It just I will give you the chance to be on my show. I will still take a look, and the way how I have it is, if you approach me and you say you want to be on, I'm like, okay, I'll get you on. But if I'm actively looking, and I typically ask a lot of people, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. Of I ask a lot, whether it's Reddit, it's in Discord, it's on Twitch, on Twitter. I'm asking almost every day. Hey, you want to be on my show? You want to be on my show? And with that, I don't think I would ever get tired of it because I love talking to people. I love asking questions, but most importantly, it's a form of catharsis for me because I get to just sit down for 2 hours in my chair, drinking my water or my Dr. Pepper, whatever have you. And I just get to talk and connect with people because at the end of the day, I feel like there will always be an infinite amount of stories to be told that people never get the opportunity to hear. And for me, just being able to do my show, I know I won't get tired of it. And as for the future of the show itself, I'm learning to pace myself out a little more, making sure that I know, taking more time to devote to cuz during I'll call it the Phantom Fame arc, the era, uh, we shifted a little more towards just having fun conversations and just talking and asking questions. And I loved it. Don't get me wrong, it was wonderful. It's if we went back to that, it's awesome. Something I noticed though, very recent, I'm like, we were moving a little bit away from what the show originally was, where I stopped researching questions in favor of just improv questions on the spot. And I think that's one of the things that really just set my show apart from others was that I took the time to research and formulate good questions to ask. I
Hmm.
feel like that's what a lot of shows or podcasts they don't do as much is they don't take the time to know who they're bringing on. And they just like, "Oh, I'm having Iron Mouse on? Okay, well, I know she has a chronic deficiency disorder, immunodeficiency disorder. We can lean into that. I know that she won VTuber of the Year. We'll talk about that." And so it's like, yeah, those are good, easy questions. But I feel like when you really get down to just seeing who they are as an individual, like I think one of the best interviews I've had thus far was way back. I want to say it was in November. It was either November or December. And I really dug deep into researching the person I had on. And it was one of those moments where they're like, "Oh, well you learned about that?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I thought that was super interesting." And so it was at that moment I'm like, that is what separates a good show from a great show is attention to detail with the respect of your artist. And that's where the future of the show is going back to is making sure we're having good questions, we're having good dialogue, making sure that the guest is comfortable. Like when I had you on my show,
Hmm.
I something I always do with all my guests is I like to talk with them beforehand. I like to make sure that they know what's going on. I inform them. Transparency is a big thing with that. And so, making sure that going forward, we're keeping that. We're keeping all of that comfortability that has with the show. But not only that, because like that's all the formality stuff. The real future of the show, we're taking a break at the end of April. We're coming back in May, and we have some big things planned. Like I'm so excited. Like for instance, we're doing more performances, we're doing more tournaments, we're hosting more things because my goal is to shift my content to more performative things. And I'm using the VOD, I'm trying to make the VOD a brand that centers around all my things. That's why like my Yu-Gi-Oh tournament I just had, it's the VOD presents the Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel tournament or Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel Cup. This next thing I'm doing next month, it's the VOD presents the VTuber Artist Cup. So I'm using the VOD as a conduit to spread everything, and that's what the future of the show will be. Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
No, no, it's fine. It's funny you mention all that. A mutual friend of mine is trying to pique my interest in Yu-Gi-Oh, Master Duel, and Beyblade, and some of these other things, and which I
Hey, Mike.
were maybe a little bit after my time. I was a kid of the '90s who grew up on baseball cards and Pogs. Um, that
Baseball
was sort
cards
of
and
ours, and maybe a little bit of top trumps, but it was yeah, that was if you were a kid growing up in the United Kingdom or in the US, that was his thing back in those days. Or you had your Game Boy, or we had Pokemon and Pokemon cards, and
mhm.
but that it's a whole new world, really a whole new world, and it's quite fascinating. And I'm having just a jolly time learning all I can about it, and I love being around people who are passionate about that. So who knows? Maybe you'll see me and a few friends popping up in future tournaments. I don't know. But
Forward
that's
to it.
one thing I do want to circle back to, and this is probably something on the more human side of things. Um, and it's becoming a question I like to ask anybody that is on this program. Um, you mentioned having those conversations and sort of telling the untold stories somehow, some way.
Mhm.
If you could be remembered for nothing else, is that what you want your legacy to be, or would you prefer it to be something else?
I feel like that would be a proper legacy I'd want to be remembered for
Okay.
because one of the things that I learned in my short life, relatively short life thus far, is the old what is it? It's the axiom or the idiom, whatever you want to the word used for it is just um you are only truly gone or you're only truly dead when you are forgotten. And what that means is that when people don't know who you are, when your name it's a very good illustration of it is the Disney movie Coco, where the
Oh,
moment that nobody knows who you are, no matter like 200, 500 years, even 20 years after you die and you leave this mortal plane, if nobody knows who you are, nobody knows what your story is, nobody knows anything about that, that's when you're truly dead. Is that when if you are completely forgotten. And so that's what really fills me with such happiness is these people who, I've so far in my show, I've had somebody between, two followers and almost 20,000. And to me, their size means nothing to me because every time their entire story is always, well, I'm just happy somebody gets to hear me do this because like some people will get to go their entire career and not be able to talk about themselves. And I feel like that's one of the best things you can do is sit there and listen and be like, "Hey, just who are you? Tell me who you are. I want to hear what makes you tick. I want to hear your story." And for a lot of people, just having somebody listen is more than enough. And if I could be remembered for one thing, it's hearing all of these stories. It's like the YouTube channel, Great Big Story. I love that
Mm.
channel. Just you would not be able to know these wonderful people otherwise because, we prioritize these big names, we prioritize these, big things. We just don't take a moment to stop and acknowledge the people who are not a part of those cliques. Yeah, that's that. I would not mind being, uh, my legacy being
I think it's a good legacy. Really does.
that.
So, for those who are watching all of this, perhaps they're getting a bit inspired. Perhaps they've had some ideas of their own. Perhaps they
Mhm.
see two anime boys up on two
Two
anime lads
anime
up on the
boys.
screen here, and they're thinking, you know what, I could do that. I could be a VTuber. I could, I could also, host a chat show, host a podcast, or do all
Yeah,
these things. I can play video games on screen. What's your advice for anybody who's got the inspiration going, but they need to put action to the inspiration?
I'd have to say a couple things. Um, First and foremost, I'd say the most important thing you need to have is just a passion to do it.
Mm,
Because if you're not happy and you're not enjoying it, then you should not be doing it, or you should change the circumstance you're in to try and enjoy it. It's kind of like if your parents force you to play the violin, but you want to be a cowboy. You want to ride horses, and you want to do some roping, and so but you're being forced to play classical music. It's like you're not going to develop as an individual if you're doing things you don't like. And so I think the very first thing you should learn is have a passion for what you do, because it's the adage of, if what is it, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And once you have that passion, and especially if you want to be a VTuber, if you want to do that, what I would say, take your time. It's not going to be a quick process. Unless you lightning strikes you twice, that will happen. Um, but as for what happens a lot of the time, just take your time. If you're happy and you're enjoying what you're doing, the growth will come naturally. And trust me, people don't care as much about the audio issues or the tech issues as much as you think. Most people are pretty understanding about it. Like, for instance, look at me. Look how fuzzy I am on screen. But and I always love calling attention to that because it really does humanize what we do. Like, see Lunar seeing you in the chat, you're a new VTuber. I just love the idea that you say you're a PNG tuber arm. I just like that. It's just an
mm,
arm.
yes.
But, you know, just know that there will always be a place for you wherever you go, especially if you choose to be in a community like this. Um, and if you want to do something like podcasting, like doing a talk show, that's probably the third piece of advice I would say behind: have the passion, don't sweat the small stuff. And the third thing is have something that you love that will set you apart. Because a lot of people don't like to hear that of, you may be good at gaming, but so are 1,000 other people.
That's
So
true.
if you do something that you like, make it big. So if you like gaming, do a tournament, do speed runs, do challenges,
Hmm.
spice it up and take what you have and make it fun. It's like, instead of just doing a basketball game, turn yourself into the Harlem Globetrotters and make a show out of it. You know, be the Harlem Globetrotter of whatever it is you choose to do. Because at the end of the day, that is what people like to see, is you having fun on the court and just making everybody laugh and everybody enjoy it. Because they will love that more than the actual ball going in the hoop. And more often than not, a lot of people are bad at shooting, throwing the ball in the hoop, but they really do enjoy the flashy passes that go toward it. That's all I got to say on that. Those are my three things on if you guys want to do this. It's a lot of fun, and you just have to be committed. If you think you're going to get that fame and that fortune within the first month, I'm sorry to say nobody is like Gargora, where you go and everybody just like, I want to follow
Yeah.
that.
It's
So
kind of a once in a generation sort of thing.
very
As for
much
the
so.
both of us, we definitely had to grind to get
Mhm.
where we are.
And yeah, definitely. And not only that, is while I am working hard to get more of a following, it's not my primary concern.
Hmm.
Because at that point, if I'm more focused on the followers and I'm more focused on the numbers, I'm just gonna get more and more depressed. Uh, and so
That's
that's
true.
why every time I go live, I I don't have my follower count up. I don't have my viewer count up. I just keep those turned off because if I'm streaming for the influence of trying to get those numbers up, it's not gonna work. That's why I always tell people streaming is a hobby. Keep it as a hobby, and unless you have the time and the money to devote to make it a full-time job.
Yes.
Treat it as a hobby. That's all it'll ever be until your Twitch paycheck, your first Twitch paycheck pays your rent, treat it as a hobby. That's my advice. Perhaps another big piece of advice for doing this.
Sound advice for anyone wanting to become a VTuber, a content creator of some kind, and also I would say some good life advice, which was going to be my next question was life advice. Just parting words of wisdom as we wrap up here. If you have anything else that you wanted to add on to that.
I have one piece of advice that I've carried with me since high school, um, where I feel like a lot of people should take this to heart, and it is, let's see, where is it? Where? Oh, I had it.
You wrote it down somewhere, and then the sticky
I
note disappeared.
did.
Oh
I
no!
so it was the I wanted to share a little bit of the quick backstory behind it. Okay,
Hmm.
so there is a castle in Scotland, and in that on that castle, um, there is a saying that was inscribed on it that was said to be attributed to Shakespeare. And it says, "Whate'er thou art, act well thy part." Now, some people have heard this. And there is a longer version of that. "Whate'er thou art, act well thy part, therein the honor lies." And from there, I just take it as "Whate'er thou art, act well thy part." Because at the end of the day, what that means is whatever you're going to do, be the best at what you're going to do. Because if you're not trying to be the best at what you do, it just means you don't have the passion and you just don't have the love for it. So that means if you're going to be a VTuber, try your best to be the best VTuber you can be. Don't try and do more than you can do. Be the best that you can do. Whether that's being a VTuber, be the best VTuber you can be. Whether you're going to be the best musician, the best actor, the best just person, do what you can do. I almost went into a little bit of the religious route
That's
of
fine.
do the best you can do and let God cover the rest. That comes from my youth of
Hmm.
religious studies.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're religious, at least that's what I follow. But for those who are not religious, do the best you can, and that's all anybody can ever ask you to do. And if they're asking you to do more, well, they have to supplement some of that because
Yeah.
you physically cannot give. They say give 110%. You can't give 110%.
No.
Give 100%. So whatever you do, be the best at what you can be and what you can physically do. That's
I
my
love
life
that.
advice.
I love that. That's great. And just remembering that no matter what, you are enough. That's
Oh yeah.
yeah. Val, thank you so much for this. This was a wonderful conversation. Again, all of Val's information is going to be included in the show description when this is uploaded to to the YouTube, to Acast, and to Spotify. Um, uh, thank you so much, Val. Thank you for this.
Well, thank you for having me. Like ever since you came on the show, and we had our conversations before, I'm just like, this is somebody who every time I talk with, I never have a dull conversation. One, it's your voice. I just love your voice. it,
Thank you.
because you've talked about how you worked in radio.
I did.
Oh, man, if I heard you on the radio, I would not be able to click off of that. But not only that, just you know, this is a very fun and a very I say even more down to earth show than what I have, because there's just something unique about just sitting down, nice, quiet, no distractions. Just hey. how are you? And
Yeah.
so I'm really happy about that I could be on this podcast with you. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Lord Rexworth podcast. I hope these discussions have ignited your curiosity, sparked inspiration, or provided a moment of relaxation. To stay connected with the podcast and access additional content, be sure to visit my website at lordrexworth.com and follow me across all platforms there. Again, that's lordrexworth.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Your support fuels our journey to continue bringing you engaging conversations and even some soothing ASMR experiences. As we conclude today's episode, remember, your mind and spirit are powerful forces, and we encourage you to embrace the positive energy that you've gained here. Until next time, take a moment for yourself, stay inspired, and continue exploring the boundless possibilities that life has to offer. Visit lordrexworth.com and be a part of our growing community. Thank you for being with us on the Lord Rexworth podcast.